Hello everyone and welcome to Luminar Coffee Break. I'm Angela Andrieux and today we're going to talk about balancing softness and detail when adding a glow effect to a photograph. A lot of times the glow effects will soften detail, so I'm going to show you a couple of ways that when I want to retain a bit of detail in the image and keep some of that detail preserved while still getting that nice glowy effect. I want to say welcome to Wolfgang, Pat, Joseph. So glad you're able to join us today. Hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Let's go ahead and jump into Luminar AI. So I've got this gorgeous portrait up on the screen, and I love it because it has so many colors and it can have a kind of harsh feel with all of those really bright colors. So I wanted to soften it and add some glow, which is what I did. This is the after image. Let me go ahead and click over here and show you the before. And you can see that it's a much more muted, a little bit underexposed. So we did a bit of work to really bring that out, make her face come alive, make it look very soft. But you can see we still have great detail on her hair. Her eyes are sharp. You can still see texture in her clothes. So it's a really great balance of that detail and softness. Let me walk you through how I did it. I'll right click on the image to start, go to adjustments and revert this to the original. And we'll begin with the templates. And I'm going to use a template that I really enjoy. I'm going to scroll down here to the portrait section, and I believe it's under Easy Portraits. There it is, High Key. And I like this because it works well for this slightly underexposed image. It just brightened it up, gave us a little bit more detail to work with, and I think it's a great starting point. Now let's move over to our Edit tab and do a little bit of fine tuning. First thing I want to do is crop this in. I feel like the crop is a little bit wide. There's a bunch of stuff going on over here on the left that's not really adding to our story. So I'm going to actually change the ratio on this to a 4:5. Move that over so she's completely in the frame, and then just pull this in a little bit tighter. And I actually really like that the rule of thirds, that intersection of these lines, is very close to her eye. So that's a very pleasing portrait. We can even pull that back out a little bit more if you want to be kind of spot on and have her eye right there on the intersection of those lines. I'll hit return on my keyboard to commit the crop. And now let's go through and take a look at some of the different glow tools that are inside of Luminar AI. I'm going to scroll down first, and we're going to look at Mystical, Glow, and High Key. First off, Mystical, it's one of my favorite tools. I use it quite a bit, but I use it more in landscape than I do in portraits. And it tends to make things very, well, mystical looking. It adds a sense of mystery because it brightens up the brightest areas of the image, but it actually adds some contrast, darkens things down. And I'm not really sure it's doing us any favors for this particular image. I'm going to reset that tool. Let's go ahead and skip down to High Key. And High Key is a particular style of photography where you slightly overexpose an image. They're typically very bright. So if I bring this up, this is going to brighten up the entire image, and it even flattens out the colors a little bit. I'm not really particularly fond of how this looks on this image. Of course, we could pull that back for a softer effect. It's not bad, but it's not doing what I want either. Let me go ahead and reset that, and instead let's check out what the Glow tool can do. Inside this tool, we have 4 different options. We have Soft Focus, Glow, Orton Effect, and Orton Effect Soft. Let me start by bringing my amount slider up really high. We're going to back it off later, but I want you to see what the difference is between these different effects. So this is Soft Focus. You can see that her eyes are still sharp, but everything else has gotten very, very glowy, a little bit brighter. The colors are a little punchier. If we go to Glow, you'll see that it has a nice glow. The details are more retained. The colors don't get punched up as much, and it's not nearly as bright. Let's go ahead and take a look at Orton Effect. Now this really punches up the brightness. It punches up the color, but I feel like there's more detail around her eyes, her hair, even the texture, especially right here where the plane of focus is nice and sharp. You can see that texture in her sweater. I think that one's really nice. And then we also have Orton Effect Soft, which does this very similar thing, but it mutes the colors. In this instance, I'm going to go with the Orton Effect because I think it's a really nice balance of soft and sharp. We can refine that a little bit here with our advanced settings. I can pull back a little bit on that softness and pull back a little bit on the brightness overall. And we can adjust the contrast. If you feel like it's a little too contrasty, I'm going to pull that down a little bit. And I think the warmth and coolness levels of this are good. Now I'll go to my amount slider and I'm going to pull that back down and just kind of wiggle that slider around until I find a point that I think it looks good. And I think right about there really is quite lovely. So we can turn this off, back on again, and I feel like it's just given a nice kind of atmosphere to this particular photo. Now to finish this off, let's go ahead and take a look at our portrait tools and see if we can refine her face a little bit more. And that's going to be again where we take a look at details versus softness is in things like face light. We can bring up the face light a little bit, fill in the shadows on her face. Her face doesn't need any slimming. Let's take a look at her eyes. One of the things I like to do is I see that she has brown eyes, so I can actually brighten them a little bit and add a bit of extra detail by going into the iris selection and selecting brown eyes. Now you'll see it overlays a different kind of color of eye, but it's still brown. And if I want to blend that into her natural eye, I can pull back on the iris visibility and it just adds an extra little hint of glow to her eyes. I really like the effect. I'll also add a little bit of iris flare and that brightens up the bottoms of her eyes. So that's if we had a reflector reflecting the light into the bottom of her face to bring out that light, that detail in her eyes. And I would probably bring up my eye enhancer a little bit more. I think that looks pretty good. Let's take a look at the mouth here. I'm going to also bring up the lip saturation and darken them a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe even use a little bit of eye whitening here just to whiten the whites of her eyes a little bit. You don't want to go too far because then it starts to look a little bit over the top. Maybe right about there. And then I think I'm going to back off the iris visibility a little bit more and the iris enhancer. Let's take a look at our overall effect here. So let's turn that off and back on again. I think that's a really nice change. I'm also going to scroll down to our Skin AI and I'm going to pull up that amount of skin smoothing a little bit more. And I love this because it retains the texture of the skin but just smooths out the imperfections. She also has a fair bit of shine here on the tip of her nose. So I'm going to pull up the shine removal and you'll see that if I pull that all the way up to the top, it lessens it. It doesn't get rid of it completely, but it does lessen it. You can fix that further by going into the clone and stamp and cloning in a little bit of the area around it just to kind of cover up that extra little bit of texture. We don't really have time to get into those kinds of deep details today, but I will use the erase tool to get that slight little blemish there on her chin. I'll scroll back up to our erase tool. Go ahead and let that load up. And I'll make my brush size just a teeny bit bigger, center that over the blemish, and click erase. And then we'll let that load up and render. That should nicely get rid of that blemish on her chin. And then we'll finish this off with a nice big soft vignette that'll draw us into our subject. So from there, I'll go to our vignette tool. And you know what? It didn't do a great job of pulling that in. It actually pulled in a strange color there. So what I'm going to do, go back to erase. I'm going to reset that tool. All right, there we go. And I'm going to go back into erase once more. This time I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to go ahead and zoom this into 200% so we can better see that blemish there on her chin. So I'm going to make my brush size bigger and just make sure I get right over that spot and click erase. And hopefully this does a better job this time. Sometimes you have to do this a couple of times to get the best result. Now, as we're zoomed in here, we are at 200%. I am noticing that we have some noise. So while we're in here, let's take care of that. I'm going to go to denoise, and I'm seeing some little color specks here in the detail. So I'm going to pull up the color denoise, get rid of some of that, and then we'll also pull up our luminosity denoise. Not too much because, again, I want to balance that softness with the detail. Noise reduction is great because it does smooth out that grain, but you do have a trade-off of losing detail. So I don't want to pull it up so much as I start losing detail in her eyes. So I think that's a good balance right there. And now let's jump down to the vignette, zoom back out and add that finishing touch to really draw our viewer into her beautiful face. I'm going to click on the amount slider and pull that all the way down to -100. I'm going to make that size a bit smaller. Now let's go into advanced settings. In an image like this where we really want to place this very precisely, I'm going to grab that feather for right now and I'm going to pull that all the way to the left. So we have a very harsh circle that shows us exactly where our vignette is. I'm going to make that size a bit smaller and bring that down to about the size and shape of her face. and then click choose subject and position that right over her face. I think maybe right about there looks pretty good. Now I'll take that feather and take it very heavily back the other direction so it's a nice smooth transition. We'll add a little bit of inner light, again, just to kind of spotlight her face, draw us into her face, her eyes. And now we'll go back to our mount slider and pull that back up and adjust it to the point that it looks natural. And I think right about there is good. Now we can take a look at our overall before and after. There's the before and the after. And I really love how this image has this soft, beautiful look to it, but her eyes are sharp, her hair is sharp. You can still see the texture in her sweater, and it's a great balance between sharp and soft with that glow tool. So Orton Effect for this image was the best choice in my opinion. I would love to know what you guys think. Do you use glow? Do you use mystical? Do you use high key? Let me know in the comments which one you like to use and why. I would love to learn more about how you put those tools to use. If you have any questions, make sure you pop those into the comments or into the chat, and I'll do my best to get those answered for you as well. If you're enjoying the Coffee Break series, make sure you give us a thumbs up here on YouTube. Our producers love seeing that. And if you have anything that you would like to see covered in a future episode, make sure you put that into the comments as well. We're always looking for new topics and wanting to show you what you want to learn. Let me take a look here at the comments. This looks like Wolfgang is enjoying he likes the result. That's awesome. And Jerry says, isn't there blemish removal in the face tool? Yes, there is. And I kind of skipped over that checkbox. We can go ahead and go back down to our Skin AI, tick that box. But the reason I went ahead and jumped up to the erase tool is that particular blemish down there was muted enough to where the AI didn't pick up on it. So even with that box checked, I still needed to go up to the erase tool to take care of that particular one blemish. But good catch, Jerry. All right, it looks like that's pretty much all of the comments in the chat today. Thank you guys so much for joining me and spending a little bit of your day here on Coffee Break. I will be back with you on Thursday. Vanelli will be with you tomorrow. So I want to wish you a great afternoon, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.